Yeah. All right. Well, here, let's get started here, folks. We've got quite a few people on with us. So for those who don't know me, Alex Gertsburg, Gertsburg Law Firm, and chair of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association's Legal Innovator Committee. Some of you are in and on that committee, and others are joining as our guests. So all of you, thank you for being here. Just very, very quick housekeeping, right? So we decided over the last month or two to make this go from a monthly meeting to a quarterly meeting for now, until we start congregating more regularly and in person and enjoying each other's company. Zoom, we decided to kind of spread these out a little bit more. So currently, the plan is, so just count them out, right? It's always going to be the third Wednesday of every month. I'm sorry, of every of the month of the meeting. So we've got one in March, which is now. We've got one in June. We'll have one in September. We'll have one in December. But and we've got speakers lined up for all of those. But in our efforts to bring these amazing speakers on, like Mark, to talk with us, we have actually found that we've gotten now more speakers than we have months. So we will actually have more than just quarterly calls / meetings. I will give you all plenty of advance notice as much as we can. We already have one, in fact, for May. I don't know if any of you guys read the blog, The Mad Clientist. You guys ever heard of it? It's fantastic. So it's a law firm consultant. His name is Michael Rhino. I'm going to butcher his name. It's like Rhino Wecker. Probably one of the most knowledgeable people in America on how law firms can operate efficiently and with a premium on client service. Really great guy. And so he's going to come and talk to us on the third Wednesday of May, whenever that date is. And I'll be sending more speaker information as we go. All right. Enough about that. Mark Britton, founder and former CEO of AVVO. I know all of you guys know about AVVO. You can't really be a lawyer and not know about AVVO. For the one of you that might not know about AVVO, it's this incredibly busy and feature-rich online marketplace for legal services. It provides lawyer referrals. It provides this it creates this endless database of legal information, largely comprised of actual questions and answers that clients or consumers ask attorneys, and attorneys answer. Mark came up with AVVO while vacationing in Italy, trying to enjoy himself and his family on vacation, and just getting tons of inquiries coming from clients, and thought to himself, and Mark, you'll correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong. Wouldn't it be interesting?
The zip code, Alex. You just need to be in the zip code.
Yeah. Came up with this, Mark. You came up with this idea that it would be interesting if I could connect the consumer with the question, with the attorney with the answer instantaneously, and then scale that up so that it's happening quickly, all over the place. And I'm guessing, Mark, that it became an obsession even during your Italian vacation. Here we are now. So this was in 2006. It's now 2020.
That was 2004.
Oh, this was 04. Okay,
Yeah.
I was a few years off.
It was 2005, actually. It's doesn't matter. But yes, you have the zip codes.
So a few data points here that my intrepid researcher, i.e. law clerk, was able to pull together, right? At one point, AVVO was helping a consumer once every 8.3 seconds get an answer to a legal question. That was as of 2013. So now it's probably even faster. In 2019, AVVO reported over 8 million visits per month, half of which were deemed urgent legal issues. It generates it's got hundreds of employees. It generates over $100 million in revenue per year. There are 300,000 attorneys on AVVO, which is mind-boggling. And that all came out of Mark's head. So we're going to ask him some questions about that. Mark currently serves on the board of Clio. Mark exited from AVVO a few years ago. He is now a speaker and a strategic thinker. He's got a venture capital fund called Madrona Venture Group. He speaks all over the world on technology and consumer and legal issues. I'm humbled that he accepted our invitation to speak to our group here. And so with that as the backdrop, I'm going to start firing questions at him, and you all just add, as questions come up, throw them in the chat. Dominica from the CMBA and Melanie from the CMBA, I'm just not smart enough to be able to multitask questions and answers in chat. So if you guys can interrupt freely at some point with questions from the group, that would be swell.
You got it.
What's that? Sound good?
I said you got it. Sorry.
Good. Thank you. No, we're good. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, but
I found myself
can I interrupt before you jump in? So
please, yeah.
Let me just say this. So I'm a lawyer, still active in Washington. I'm a member of 3 bar associations, although the Virginia bar, which was my first bar, I'm no longer active. I just want to say this. I do a lot of speaking, but I love to come to groups like this because it is actually where legal is happening. This is like the honest truth, where the rubber meets the road. Come up with however you'd like to say it. It's in your local bar associations. It's on the ground. So the beauty of Zoom is that I can take time with a small group such as this and actually get to know you a little bit and really give you an honest piece of my time, rather than standing up on a big stage with big screens next to me and you just hearing me say whatever I want to say. So you can ask me anything, really. You're not going to throw me off. You're not going to insult me. And you're welcome to disagree with me. There's all sorts of stuff. Some of you may have seen me speak. Some of you may have seen me in the middle of firefights with other lawyers. I really feel that the industry needs to change and is hurting itself by not changing at the rate that it needs to. As just a bit of a setup, thematically, I'm guessing that questions we talk about today, this is going to come up. I'm not some omnipotent power. I don't know everything, and I'm wrong all the time. So if you disagree, let's have a conversation. And but please just ask me anything. Maybe I stole that from Reddit, but it still applies.
Yeah. And the questions that I'm going to ask Mark are there literally to get to the part where you guys ask questions, right? So please jump in anytime. Okay. So Mark, you just said that you're wrong a lot, but I know that you're right a lot. And so based on that, I'm curious. You've got a crystal ball. Imagine that you've got a crystal ball in front of you. I know you've given this a lot of thought, and your crystal ball tells you what the legal profession looks like over the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. What is your crystal ball based on your experience with AVVO, with Expedia, with Clio? Where do you see our profession changing over the next 5 to 10 years relative to what it looks like and feels like today?
Okay, I'm happy to try to answer that, but I will say that it's you're asking actually a complete unknown. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. For one, when we launched AVVO in the summer of 2006. And that's probably where your researcher came up with that. That was the time of launch. And we, of course, hired up the team prior to that. The iPhone didn't exist, right? So the idea, like, we knew generally that computing would become more compact and more accessible, but I'm not sure anyone anticipated the App Store and the complete there was this ecosystem that was completely contained inside one device. I don't think I saw that coming, and yet it has completely changed all of our lives. It's almost been the next wave of the computing revolution. That being said, I do think there are some macro pieces in here that are very important for lawyers. And by the way, another example, I said mentioning a couple, I don't believe, we love to look back on technology and say, oh, we should have seen this coming. But the reality is the evolution of technology it's iterative. So if you think of, AVVO was just an extension of Expedia. So I was Expedia's first general counsel. By the time I left Expedia, I was the number 2 at Expedia, overseeing many other things other than legal. And but it was that idea. So I actually lived in Italy and taught in Italy. That's what I was doing there. And that's where I came up with this idea of, okay, well, nobody calls me for travel advice. And yet here I am on the other side of the ocean, and people are constantly calling me for legal advice. Why is that? Well, it's because there were no tools out there for consumers in the way that there were for travel. So if you just step back and squint a little bit, with AVVO in its first iteration, all we did was built the Expedia marketplace for lawyers, right? And then so it was a directory and had all this information around the directory. All Expedia is just a directory of travel options with additional functionality around that. And then we layered on the Q&A, et cetera, which really, you hit it spot on, really drove AVVO. So there's this idea that there will always be things that come in orthogonally that you just have no sense for. And as you iterate your way and start hitting some of those, it will completely change your trajectory. And so I can only speak in very broad terms, and with all of my biases, let me tell you a couple of things that I feel the future of law holds. So in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think this is within 5 years, but it is absolutely necessary that we need to bring in more business into law. So we have been isolated as a profession, as a silo, looking at ourselves as not an industry, but rather as a profession, if not a guild, that is somehow unique in that it doesn't need to be excellent in running businesses. I see this every day in that, excellent lawyers who I would call artisans, right? I mean, lawyers at the highest, if you think of legal work as a pyramid, right? There's all this entry level work where you're giving early advice, where you're doing the simplest of forms, just working through, whether it's the business operations, the day-to-day business operations, the day-to-day legal commodity type stuff that a paralegal, that anyone could be doing. And then you move up to, with each task that gets more difficult, at the very top of that pyramid, it's where lawyers love to practice law, because it is complex law to where you can bring your art forward and have that intersection. It's where lawyers get to be the most innovative in thinking about their clients' interests and how they further them. But if within that pyramid and within that artisanal part, we get distracted so much and pulled to the bottom of the pyramid because there's all this stuff. We're not organizationally sound, right? So we're kind of running around in our law firms we're like chickens with our heads cut off because we've never perceived being a lawyer as being a great business person. And this goes all the way back to law school. I mean, how many business classes did you take in law school? For most of you, there are a couple of law schools that are getting better at this, but for most of you, the answer is zero. And again, you'll have some lawyers that are like, listen, I don't want to go anywhere near that business stuff. I work in a big firm, or I do only, you know, I don't know. I do federal administrative law. You know, there's stuff where I don't ever see myself being in a smaller law firm. I don't see myself being the head of a law firm. And yet that's almost like, I mean, I do think there should be a place for that type of person in law, but at the same time, like you're going to be part of a business no matter what. And wouldn't you like to know the macro construct within which you operate? But we can put them out as like, you know, the furthest, the one standard deviation in the middle of the bell curve. You're all running businesses and you're part of businesses, and how as an industry, how we move the industry forward, we must bring in more business. So that's, and that I can have a conversation with you about what's going on in Arizona and Utah, to where this recognition is coming in and they're trying to change the rules around that. But I don't want this to turn into a complete monologue. We'll come back to it.
Mark, if I could, because you're that I definitely want to talk about the regulatory support or opposition to bringing more business into the law in a second. Let me ask you to get really specific and practical though, right? When you say over the next 5 to 10 years, we will need to, and we will bring more business into the law. Get specific with me about that, right? What are the specific changes that you're envisioning relative to the landscape today?
So we have two choices. So by the way, today, with the way that the model, that the Ohio ethical rules are organized, and they're very similar to every other state, you cannot share your revenue with anyone that is not a lawyer, right?
Right.
As a consequence, and we can talk about the history of that or whatever you want to do, but as a consequence, there is zero incentive for any business person to come into legal and attempt to innovate, right? So there is the responsibility as we sit back and we say, God, the legal profession seems really inefficient. And just to give you some data, if you look at, does anyone know off the top of their head how many people, as a percentage of US adults, what percentage of US adults, so this includes high, medium, and low income adults, what percentage of them actually use lawyers? Use lawyers, like have interacted with a lawyer voluntarily. Any ideas? Anybody?
Under 10%.
Yeah, it's 15%, okay? If you layer in, if we just isolate that data set to people who are moderate to high income, so let's cut it at about 85,000 and up, annual income of 85,000 and up, it's around 50%, okay? So the utilization rates for lawyers is incredibly low. If we had these utilization rates for doctors, we would be calling this a nationwide medical epidemic, right? Like we have a problem on our hands of epic proportions. But the legal profession doesn't really feel that or see it that way. So to get specific, Alex, the only people that can innovate within legal right now are lawyers. Every responsibility to figure out that utilization rate is you. And you, most of you, would rather be practicing law than running businesses. And so there's this huge mismatch between what the supply side lawyers want and what the demand side needs, which is the clients. And they're just not meeting. They're seriously doing this, which has led to the rise of companies like LegalZoom that are eating up the bottom of the pyramid because all of you aren't doing it well. So I'm a big believer, in order to save legal, we actually have to relax the monopoly and allow investment by business entities with lawyers so that lawyers can first innovate and then second, innovate in the name of the customer. Actually stop doing this and start doing this, and start delivering services that are truly customer centric and drive up those utilization rates. And the size of this is of a massive proportion. It is macro, it is industrial. Individually, you guys will be able to succeed on your own in onesies and twosies. But if you look at the profession from a whole, if you look at the client satisfaction rates, if you look at the utilization rates, and if you look at the lawyer attrition rates, it's very, very broken. So that would be my most macro point, in that, like they're doing in England, like they're doing in Australia, like they're working on in Canada, and like they're working on in Utah and Arizona, bringing in business people to invest in the legal profession, to bring their learnings from other industries, to bring, more learnings, more expertise, and greater efficiency, greater innovation in the door, I think is critical.
Yeah,
let me just say two other quick things, Alex. Within that, so if being very specific, we as lawyers, if you say, where do we need to be in the next 5 to 10 years? We need to really speed up the accessibility of lawyers in real time. So right now there is a lag time that is unacceptable. And think about any, like doctors, let's leave accountants out of it, but just think of Amazon. Like, why do you spend all of your money at Amazon now? Because they have figured out how to deliver their service very, very quickly for you. Okay. So I used to put a picture on a screen in a car in speeches and say, when someone gets pulled over for a DUI, there should be a lawyer there. When someone gets in an accident, there should be a lawyer there. That's client-centric thinking. And all of you right now, you're like, well, but there's a problem with attorney-client and conflicts, and stop thinking about all that. We got to start thinking about the opportunities. And it's not only the opportunities, it's what the customer wants and needs. And then the last piece of this, I'll just say quickly, within this device, okay, your entire practice needs to operate within this device. I still do some, but I used to do a lot more closed session speeches for Supreme Courts, judges, et cetera. And I used to hold that up. I used to have a slide that showed 4 quadrants. It was people speaking in 4 screens. And I would say, this is the courtroom of the future. And judges would just go crazy and tell me how I didn't understand the judiciary and how the process worked in their courts, et cetera. And look where we are today. And it's coming. This is changing everything. Zoom's changing everything. And this mobile factor and this the distributed work and the digital work is only going to increase at an exponential rate post-pandemic. And by the way, in order to get both those right, we need business people to help us think through it.
Yeah, we've got a question. I was able to multitask a little bit here. Michael Beardsley. With the future need to bring business into the law, do you anticipate a need for law firms to employ process improvement methodologies, process engineering, et cetera, to improve the firm? And what's necessary to get firms to see that as a value?
So absolutely. So it's a great question. Thank you, Michael. And by the way, Michael, can you just make a noise, because your name sounds so familiar. Do we know each other, or did we meet through AVVO? I don't know. I can't see you unless you say something, Michael, and then you'll pop up.
Hi, Mark. I'm here.
Have we met?
I don't remember.
Okay. All right. Listen, I've met literally tens of thousands of lawyers, and I love you all. But your name looked familiar. So anyway, thank you for the question. So let's go. Well, let me start in the middle. Okay. The middle part is that, whether you like me to say this or not, a law firm process is a manufacturing one. Okay, from end to end. So there's the manufacturing of the issue and the task with the client. And we can even go farther back to say there's the hunting for the client, there's the acquisition of the client, there's the onboarding of the client, there's the onboarding of the issues and the tasks. There is the artistic part of law in processing that and working through whatever interaction with regulatory body or a judge or co-counsel or whatever it may be. There are a bunch of iterations as you work through that. And then you get to an end state where you get paid. And you may get paid along the way, but it is a manufacturing line from end to end. And no lawyer in the country, most lawyers in the country don't think of their processes at all. They don't see it as a manufacturing line, and they don't process, and mapping those processes is something that just is not innate. They've never had to tap into that. They've never been taught about it. Every other industry, let's take medical, let's take accounting, they have their processes mapped down to a complete T. And that's why I say put it in the middle. That's the organizational result. But if you go up a click, they have things like industrial think tanks that spend time thinking about processes and customers and interaction with life in the world, and how they plug in and how they can remain and increase their relevancy as an industry. We don't have that in legal. And so your question, Michael, is spot on, that yes, we need to be better as lawyers in first understanding our processes, that we have processes, understanding what our industrial and our micro-specific firm processes are, and how to engineer them, and how to be excellent in them. That culture is non-existent in legal, right? I shouldn't say non-existent. You see it in some firms, but I'm talking in macro terms, and especially like who's driving that thinking? The Supreme Courts, they're not thinking like this. The bars, they're not thinking like this. And so to get firms to see this value, I think it's partly from the top down in getting the regulators and people who drive our culture in the Supreme Court and the bars to start driving some of this. I think the big firms are important in pushing this, but I think the change will really come from the bottom up if we are to allow lawyers to try new things and iterate on innovation, and then that will help drive some of this innovative thinking, the business excellence that drives so many other industries.
Yeah. And by the way, Mark, I was in a Tesla the other day, and it prompted me to think of this question that I wanted to make sure I got to ask you, because there was a time when the idea that there would be a self-driving car, that there was insane, right? There were aspects of driving that just simply could not be automated, and changing lanes, for example, right? So parallel parking, right? And I watch it happen now. What aspects of the practice of law do you believe cannot be automated, if any?
By the way, just on Greg's, Greg also, we'll come back, Greg, possibly to your question, but that's a very accurate question. Okay, so this is what part of law can't be automated?
Yeah.
So I would say two principal areas. The ethics. Okay, so one thing that is so important, I will talk so much about how we should break open parts of the law. But, and so I think I'm often misunderstood as like this lawyer hater iconoclast. And I grew up, I'm surrounded by lawyers. I'm married to a lawyer. And I love the legal profession. And my greater worry is about losing the profession rather than I want it to evolve. And one place where we bring so much to society is through our ethics. And I think your average person that goes into law really cares about helping people and helping drive helping drive society forward, and they get very upset when they see someone wronged. These are beautiful, beautiful things that drive the legal profession. And we are known, like the legal profession will not succeed. It will fail in its entirety if we don't continue to be stewards of kind of the ethical makeup of how you drive justice and resolution in the United States. So that can never be replaced. I think also that, you know how I talked about that manufacturing line. There are huge parts of when you get into the art of law and the communication and the empathy and the interaction with the client, opposing counsel, the judge, there is high EQ, high human interaction that in order to get to the right place and actually move justice and resolution forward, it is where at the top of that pyramid, we step in as artists and paint the beautiful picture. And you know, some of you will say, well, Guy, you know, I'm so busy and some of the work I'm doing sure doesn't feel like art, but it is. It is really driving something that is unique. And so there's that artisanal part, but, and there's a big but that goes with this. Most lawyers mistake their, they attribute way too much, they take up way too much real estate, way too much parts of the conveyor belt on the manufacturing line and attribute it to artisanal work. So I'll give you a great example that I think automation can come in on. I work closely with a company called Clearbrief, and they are just launching right now. So this is, this will be revolutionary. I think it's if executed appropriately, but hotshot litigator. She worked in the Attorney General's office in Alaska and experience on both East and West Coast. So she spent time in the trenches as a litigator, which as an appellate litigator, which is where you got a lot of, heavy artisanal work. And she has built software that is AI driven and machine learning driven, which is just a subset of artificial intelligence. That so you upload all of your litigation documents, and it as you're writing your brief, or you can take your opponent's brief, or you can take your finished brief. So you upload all of your the entire record. So everything, all the legal, like I don't know how many people are litigators, but you usually have your hot docs, right? You pull together all of the relevant cases that are coming from both sides. You pull together the shepherdized cases, you pull together all the facts, all the discovery, and then you have this core of hot docs. What this will do is it will tell you in almost like an AVVO score down the middle of the page where the is so that the machine goes off and reads everything, and then it'll come back and tell you where your opposing counsel or where you have either miscited a case or the record, or another place in the record that is more relevant than the one that you cited. So imagine for every key assertion, there is a red, green, and yellow, or an AVVO-like score that goes with it that says, this is 72% effective, here's where the 90% is. Or here's the red, green, and yellow on where your opposing counsel has made mistakes or is trying to get around the law or the record.
Yeah.
Now, that historically has been the sole province of the lawyer's art, right? Now, it has been pushed down to paralegals and a lot of junior associates, but it starts to hit right in that artisanal area. And I do think for the average lawyer, when they hear about this, they go, oh, I'd like to have that.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Alex.
no, I'm sorry, I interrupt. You're reminding me that I was like one of the last law school classes that was forced to shepherdize using books.
That's right.
And then like the very next year, it was all Shepherd, it was all Lexis, and there was no need to do it anymore.
Yeah, so we must be similar eras, but I think I'm way older than you. So what year did you come out?
Oh, 2000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because I came out in 92, and I've kind of felt like I spent all my law school in the library with the books.
Yeah.
And then when I was an associate, I was having to use Westlaw all the time.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Greg, you're asking great questions and making great comments, and I want you to have the opportunity to ask them directly to Mark. So let me turn your question over to you.
Well, I think Mark saw the first question, but I at the beginning of my career, I did a lot of work in the corporate space for healthcare companies. And at the time, it's still around, but not in what it used to be, this concept called corporate practice of medicine, which really limited how physician practices ran and who could own them and who could employ a doctor. And there were some similarities, a lot of similarities to the legal space as far as that goes. And doctors are terrible business managers, probably like accountants and lawyers. But they a lot of them solved the problem by using practice management companies that came in and basically took over the business side of their medical practices so that the doctors could focus on being doctors, which is what they wanted to do, and actually get better decisions made. And then I think once they sort of got a taste of working for other for non-physicians, having non-physicians essentially running their practices, it gave way to dropping corporate practice medicine rules. So now, most of these doctors are employed by hospital systems, and they're employed by
by huge corporations.
Yeah, big companies on there. In my city, most of the medical practices have been bought up by the three big hospital systems here. So that's how medicine evolved, and I've been thinking that in some respects. I mean, I think lawyers think that they are good businessmen, even though I think that you're right that they're typically not. But I'm just wondering if you see any kind of similar evolution happening in legal, with legal practice management companies, or just skipping it outright and going right to outright ownership by non-lawyer owned companies. That's obviously what's happened in the rest of the world. And especially with big accounting companies. But I'm curious of where you see that going here in the U.S., or will this be basically 20 more years before we really see anything? Yeah,
so that's all from my understanding of the medical world, and I actually built a fairly large business in medical, which was AVVO Medical. I don't know if you guys know that. And if you go look at HealthTab now, that is what was AVVO Medical. We sold that to HealthTab. But you're spot on, and that is how it is all evolved. I think the one thing that's missing there is there remain many physician-owned practices where the physicians are great business people. They enjoy running the business side, and they're very happy being 3, 4, sometimes a solo practitioner and running their own business. That there is room for that. But overwhelmingly, the doctors, they just want to practice medicine. And They want to be at the highest point of their pyramid and just seeing patients and not dealing with all this health insurance crap. That's one thing that legal doesn't have, that is a very big challenge within medical, is you have kind of this three-way sumo match going on, where you have the third party being the insurer that's bucking its way into the ring. Fortunately, we do not have that in legal. And so I think the equation is actually simpler. I don't know the pace that this will happen. I think we're seeing in Arizona and Utah, which is very quickly, the recap on Arizona and Utah is that there are two big pieces. There is Model Rule 5.4, which is sharing revenue with non-lawyers. That I don't know what the Ohio equivalent is. That is being relaxed in both of those states, and they're exploring partnering with business entities. And then there is the unauthorized practice of law, where they're looking to liberalize, bringing in the equivalent. And here's a place where it associates with medical, allowing that concept of the nurse practitioner. In Washington, we called it the limited licensed legal technician. In some states, it's called an LPO, a limited practice. I can't remember. But those are the ways that we are relaxing, in a way, in an attempt to make law more accessible, more innovative. At least in those states. California is considering some of its own rule changes. North Carolina is looking at some stuff. But you have attorneys in each of those states fighting those efforts very aggressively, very, very, very aggressively. And so do I think we will have the same rate of change? No. But I do feel that if the legal profession does not figure it out on their own, I do think you will have a burst to where there will be a big shift by someone, let's call it like a LegalZoom, that moves into the practice of law, that a bar sues them, they sue the bar for monopoly and win. This actually happened with Invisalign type of braces in North Carolina, where the dental monopoly stepped in and said, you can't do this. And they sued and lost. And that broke open non-dental procedures in North Carolina and now the nation. That's coming. That is absolutely coming for legal. Health got on top of it in two ways: the non-doctor ownership and bringing in the nurse practitioner to serve more people more efficiently. That's really all that's going on in legal in Arizona and Utah. That's it. They're copying medical. But if we don't get it right and start doing some of this as a profession, somebody very well financed is going to break it open, and it will be incredibly painful for the legal profession.
Mark, let me turn it over to Julie Herzog. You've got a question, Julie. I think. Julie, you there?
Well, I can read it. So how do we best communicate? Oh, hello, Julie.
Yeah, either way, you can read it if you're visual, but basically, I've been in entrepreneurs organization for a number of years. I'm very entrepreneurial. I've been working with the partners of my firm, trying to get them to move in this direction. And other than showing them the money by, kind of changing my own part of the practice, and they start seeing how I'm making more money and whatnot, that's encouraged them to kind of move to be more, client friendly and using technology and focus more on the business side. But what else can we do with the law firm culture when we're dealing with people that, like to practice law, and they see these innovations as getting in the way of them being able to practice like they're used to?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that you'll notice that I don't spend a lot of time with products and services that go through big law firms, because going through the executive committee in a big law firm is probably the most painful sales cycle you will ever experience. And so, you know, another thing, if there's a thing I preach all the time, is all of this is, there's no magic to it. It's very similar to every relationship that you have in your life. And I can't, in the same way, if I were to say, hey, my wife's pretty obstinate, what, like, how can I change her mind? I was like, I don't know your wife. But I would say the same for your partners, in that it's just relationships, right? We're dealing with a culture, especially the more comfortable and successful lawyers are, the more that they feel that the monopoly is working just as designed. And they're fine. They're not looking at things from a macro level. And that's something that I'm just not sure I can solve. I think this is where I think a third party is going to come in and solve it for them. In that I can't make, I mean, listen, I don't know how many lawyers and judges I've spoken to in my life, like given speeches to. But it's absolutely in the tens of thousands. And yet from my first speech that I gave, probably in, well, even, I don't know, in the mid 2000s, when I first started talking about this stuff, I'm giving pretty much the same speech I was giving back then. Just being totally transparent. There are little tweaks, but it's pretty much the exact same speech. Nothing's changed. And so one of the reasons that I left AVVO is because I was tired of fighting with the lawyers. I'll give you a great example. So we launched something. So when we would talk to customers, so what made AVVO successful is we would say, where is the legal consumer having issues and how can we build solutions for them? And that's, by the way, every one of you, that's that Amazon, I think there's a book called Working Backwards. One of my very good friends who is very senior at Amazon wrote this with Jeff Bezos' chief of staff. It's called Working Backwards, and it talks about how you start with the client and work backwards within the Amazon methodology. That's what made Amazon successful. That's what made AVVO successful, et cetera. And so one of the things that we felt we heard in testing consumers over and over and over was that two things why they didn't use lawyers, why those utilization rates are so low. They would, for one, they didn't know what lawyers did. They have no idea what you do. They don't get it. It is just an alternate universe for them. Even some of the most sophisticated people, right? And then the other thing the only other thing that they don't know what you do, but what they do know is that you're too expensive. Okay, that's it. That is overwhelmingly the problem that is in the consumer's minds. So we said, well, we can solve that. What we're going to do is build LegalZoom-like packages so that they go through lawyers, not go to LegalZoom. So for that entry level on the pyramid, you know, the very early entry level to build the relationship, we're going to design packages, AVVO design packages, to where it is fixed scope, you get these things, and it is fixed price. And lawyers, you're basically going to do this work at somewhere between low margin to loss leader. You know, meaning you're just meeting the client, building your client base and going from there, right? And somebody could call, for example, in real time and talk to a lawyer for $35. I can't remember what it was. This took off like wildfire. But immediately, lawyers within certain states, including Ohio, went to the bar and told them that this was undermining the legal profession, even though this was completely designed to help the legal profession be more relevant to customers. And we had horrible, I mean, it was, we had states doing non-binding advisory positions that basically froze all the innovative lawyers who said, I mean, we had literally hundreds of lawyers who were saying, this is the smartest thing I've ever plugged into my practice. And the bars effectively, through the pressure from these lawyers, shut it down. Okay, so this is my version of what you're trying to do. And in the middle of that, a very large private equity firm, KKR, came to me and said, we'd like to buy your company. And I said, I'm out. I am tired of not being, of the small denominator, the very small part of the legal profession saying, I can't innovate. So for you, to answer your question, Julia, a very long answer, I think you have three choices. You can, if you really enjoy these people as people, I think that you can only do it like in any relationship and continuing to converse with them and attempt to persuade them. If that's too frustrating for you, you got to get out and start your own practice or go to another firm where you feel like you have a better culture of innovation. I think the third is to do nothing. But you have to make a choice somewhere on that front. But yes, this is what you're bringing up is the honest truth of what's sinking the legal profession.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Mr. Opsitnik, go.
Well, Mark, I'm gonna say that I agree with you mostly, but I also disagree with you. And
Well,
I
you should stop right there, Tim,
Yeah.
because if you don't agree entirely.
I'm going to explain why.
Okay.
So, I was a litigator for 20 years and then started a technology company about 20 years ago. And since then I've started a small manufacturing company and working on a cybersecurity insurance company. And I've met lots of entrepreneurs. And what I would say, generally speaking, is entrepreneurs fall into three categories. There are those who have inherited their businesses from their mother or their father, and they're frankly not their mother and their father, and so they struggle, and there are lots of issues. And then there are those entrepreneurs that are extremely growth oriented, and it's always about grow, 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 grow. And then there's a third type of entrepreneur, which I would characterize as most small business owners, and they're really lifestyle businesses. They do very well for themselves personally and for their lifestyle. And I would challenge you that lawyers are no exception to that, and that
I agree. Sure.
you've created, you're finding a solution for a problem that may well not exist for most lawyers. Most lawyers are very comfortable with their professional status in the community and their lawyers and are in there with their clients and where they are and their comfort level and how they're held in esteem in the community, all those wonderful things. And so they're largely lifestyle businesses. And I would say that's the vast majority of lawyers. Now, there are the entrepreneurial lawyers like yourself and like Alex who, man, growth is everything. I measure myself in new clients that I get today and what I do. And for you will never, settle for anything which isn't growth oriented. And so I think the difference is to understand that there are many people who are they're totally comfortable where they're at. And that's okay. It really is okay.
But I think it misses the point, Tim, if I can push back to your pushback. And maybe I haven't made this point strongly enough. I really do care about lawyers, and I started with that, but I care about you less than the consumer. And I don't believe that lawyers will succeed. I don't believe any business, I don't believe any industry will succeed in the long run if they don't serve their customer every single day. And that's what I feel we're missing. So if we go back from a macro, and sure, they're absolutely lawyers who are they're totally fine with the construct as it is today, but your customers aren't.
Yeah, and I get it, except we're a little bit different to tackle because, we've got these 50 different states with 50 different sets of rules.
So do
And so
doctors.
it's, it's going to be very difficult to change. And, you identified
agree
the
with that.
difficulty that you had. And look, I have friends who own LegalZoom franchises, and I'm well aware of the battles that they've gone through. And, you've got states like Texas and others that, frankly, their bar is incredibly strong, and they're gonna fight tooth and nail. And so yeah, protecting consumers is very important, and I agree. And
Not protecting, helping, actually getting them
helping,
help.
protecting, those that pass the laws envision that they do so out of for reasons of protection.
Okay, that's
you may view it as helping the consumer, but they view it as protecting. So I think there's going to be a healthy balance.
Yeah, I think there is truth in all of that. For me, maybe we come at it at slightly different, from slightly different directions. I spent 12 years talking to consumers, and all they were was frustrated with the legal profession, and for the most part, not using the legal profession. That's the greatest tragedy at all. I mean, one way to think about this is if we take those people that have, moderate income and up, so that 80, 84, 85,000 and up, only half of them are using lawyers. So that if we were able to get them engaged and using legal professionals, just using the legal system that ultimately results in lawyers up in the pyramid, no matter how they come in, whether they use a nurse practitioner, a legal nurse practitioner, or a triple LT or whatever, they get used to a third party helping them. That would double, simple math would say we double the size of the addressable market. And so when I look at the number of lawyers, if we focus on this through a lawyer lens, if you look at the number of lawyers that leave the profession because they can't make it, we could, because when only half of the adult population is using you, that's a problem. And so we could have more happy lawyers. We could have lawyers who are making more money and are more successful, and a greater interaction, a greater relevance in U.S. industry, in every consumer's life, if we could just double the size of that market and get everybody using lawyers and the legal system. That's really what I want to do. That's why I believe if we solve it for the customer so that we can double the size of the market, then all boats rise, and you have many, many more lawyers who are happy with the system, that are successful within the system.
I got to tell you, just seeing who's on this call, the folks from EO and you, Mark, I would do anything to buy another hour or 3 and get you all in a room and have some beers and just keep talking. I especially would love to hear, but I want to be respectful of your time and everyone else's, about just the AVVO story itself, and how, the entrepreneurs on this call are all trying to scale in some form, and you did it better than anyone I think that most of us will ever talk to. But I do want to be respectful of your time and everyone else's. So if you will let me harass you into coming back so that we can ask you those questions, I'm going to.
I love to do this sort of thing. And yes, let's at some point, why don't we finish this call by just saying to be continued? How's that?
Oh, fantastic. And thank you, Mark, so much for giving us your time.
Great discussion, great questions. And Alex, a lot of people don't realize that you can just reach out to someone. And so much of succeeding in law and life is just keeping it simple. And Alex just reached out and said, hey, can we chat? And I love the simplicity in that, and glad it worked.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you. And guys, thank you all so much for being here. We will see you back here, hopefully, whatever the 3rd Wednesday in May is. And Mark, you have a standing invitation. I'm going to keep you on our list, so you'll see who our speakers are. Gosh, it would be just great to have you back. So thank you
Thanks for
all.
having me, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your days. Be productive. Be great lawyers.
Thanks. Happy St. Patty's Day, everyone.
Same to you. See ya.